Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be looking at a case that is, frankly, one of the most disturbing in modern criminal history. We're doing a deep dive into the official records, the reports, everything we can find on Yang Xinhai.
A man who earned the name the Monster Killer.
Exactly. And our mission today is to try and understand how one single person could be responsible for a reign of terror on a scale that is almost globally unprecedented.
It's essential we get the numbers on the table right away because they really set the stage. Between 1999 and 2003, so just a 4-year window, Yang Xinhai was officially convicted of 67 murders.
67.
And 23 rapes. And you have to understand, for a single individual, that level of violence puts him in a very, very small category of killers worldwide.
It's a staggering number. So to give our listeners some context, within modern China, where does that victim count actually place him?
He's at the absolute top of the list. It's not even close. He completely reset the scale of what people thought was possible for a lone killer in the country.
So who else would even be on that list?
Well, you have some other very notorious cases that shocked the public at the time. There's Bai Baoshan, who's responsible for 15 deaths. Horrific, but, not 67.
Right.
Or Gao Chengyang, who the media sometimes called the Chinese Jack the Ripper. He had 11 victims.
Okay, so we're talking numbers that are a fraction of Yang's total.
A tiny fraction. Even if you go back to the 80s, there was a killer named Long Jimin who was convicted of 48 murders, which is a massive number. But Yang Xinhai surpassed even that. He really is in a category all by himself.
Which brings us to the question of the time period itself. The sources all point to the 1990s and early 2000s as this really anxious time in China. It seems like it wasn't just him.
That's a key point. It wasn't happening in a vacuum. Researchers have looked at this era and they've seen a definite spike, a real increase in serial killers and mass murderers.
And what do they attribute that to?
The term that keeps coming up is heavy pressure. It's the pressure that everyday people felt during China's unbelievably rapid social and economic change. You have to remember, this was one of the biggest societal reorganizations in human history happening at breakneck speed.
Let's drill down on that a little bit, on that heavy pressure.
Yeah.
What does that look like on a day-to-day level? Because to understand how a killer like Yang could operate, we need to understand the world he was operating in.
Absolutely. So in the 90s, you have this huge wave of migration. Millions and millions of people from rural areas are flooding into the new booming cities looking for work.
Right, the factory boom.
Exactly. And this creates a massive gap between the wealthy coast and the let's say the left-behind rural interior. That's where Yang did most of his killing.
So you get these pockets of intense poverty and social decay.
And you lose the old social structures, the village life where everyone knows everyone. That safety net starts to fray and completely fall apart. People feel disconnected, anxious, and you have this huge population of people who are essentially anonymous drifters.
A perfect environment for someone like Yang to just disappear into.
A perfect hunting ground. And what made his crimes so uniquely terrifying was that he wasn't targeting a specific type of person, like a criminal or someone on the fringes. He was targeting the very heart of that rural society.
The family unit.
The family unit. Isolated farmers in their homes, asleep at night, the randomness, the sheer brutality of killing entire families, men, women, children. That created a kind of fear that spread across 4 entire provinces. It showed that the system, the police, they were completely unprepared for this kind of killer.
Okay, so let's try to unpack the man himself. Where did he come from? We have to start with his early years, because a monster like this isn't just born overnight.
No, he isn't. He was born in Zhengyang County, Zumadian. It's in Henan province, and you have to picture this as the absolute rural heartland of China, deeply impoverished.
And his family.
He was the youngest of 4 kids. His parents were poor farmers struggling to get by. His birth date is listed as either July 17th or 29th, 1968. So his entire childhood was one of pretty significant hardship and very few opportunities.
But the sources say he was actually intelligent, which sort of complicates the picture, doesn't it? He wasn't just a product of his environment.
Right. He's described as being bright, but also very introverted, withdrawn. He was smart, but he had no interest in people. And he made a choice very early on to walk away from the conventional path.
He dropped out of school.
He dropped out in 1985. He was only 17. And the crucial part is, after he left school, he never went home. He just left. He cut ties with his family and just started drifting.
So that moment, at 17, that's really the beginning of his life as an outsider.
It's the beginning of the monster killer in a way. From that day forward, he was a drifter, an itinerant laborer. He moved all over China, taking whatever odd job he could find.
And he used aliases, right?
A whole string of them. Yang Zhiya, Yang Lu, Wang Ganggang. He was constantly changing his name, changing his location. This wasn't just about being poor and needing to find work. He was actively practicing how to be invisible. He spent years honing that skill.
That's a chilling thought.
Yeah.
He was building the toolkit for a serial killer long before the killing even started. And he wasn't just working odd jobs during this time. He was already getting into trouble with the law.
Yeah, his criminal career started small and then escalated. In 1988 and then again in 1991, he was sent to labor camps for theft.
Where were these camps?
All over. The first was in Xi'an, in Shaanxi province, and the second was in Shijiazhuang, in Hebei. So even then, you see this pattern of constant movement across huge distances.
So he's familiar with the justice system. He's familiar with being incarcerated.
Exactly. And then comes the big one. In 1996, he's back in his home province of Henan, and he gets a 5-year prison sentence.
For what?
Attempted rape.
Okay, so that's a serious escalation from theft.
A major escalation. And he was released from that sentence sometime around 1999 or 2000, and it's like a switch flipped. The moment he walked out of that prison, the petty thief was gone. The mass murderer emerged. The killing spree started almost immediately.
This is where we get into some of the really strange psychological details from the sources. Before he ever picked up a weapon, his mind was already living in this world of violence. I'm talking about his notebooks.
Yes, the notebooks. This is one of the most unsettling parts of his profile. Police and his relatives found these notebooks he kept, and they weren't diaries. They were filled with these bizarre, detailed stories about murder.
Fictional stories.
Fictional stories, rough outlines for what seemed like horror films, all centered on killing. And he was obsessed with one specific place he invented, a location he called Plato Flats.
Plato Flats, what does that even mean?
We don't know. But it suggests he wasn't just an impulsive killer, he was an architect of violence. He was building a fantasy world around the act of murder long before he committed his first one. It's like he was writing the script, and then when he got out of prison, he just started acting it out.
It creates this psychological distance. He's not just killing people, he's bringing his story to life.
Precisely. And what's even darker is that the sources indicate he used his time in those labor camps for more than just serving his sentence.
He was planning.
He was scouting. He would travel, often just on a bicycle, between towns and villages near the camps. He was mapping out the territory, identifying the isolated homes, the vulnerable communities he would later terrorize. His time as a petty criminal was basically a long-term reconnaissance mission.
A bicycle. The most prolific killer in modern Chinese history planned his reign of terror on a bicycle.
It's just so low-tech and insidious.
Which is what made him so effective.
All right, let's move into the actual crimes. The reign of terror itself, from 99 to 2003. Let's break down his MO, his blueprint. The blueprint was brutally simple and ruthlessly effective. His targets were almost always the same. Farmers, entire families, living in isolated rural homes.
Places where help was a long way off.
A very long way off. His timing was always at night, when the victims were asleep. This was about maximum surprise and minimum resistance. He wanted total control.
And the weapons. This wasn't sophisticated. It was up close and personal.
Extremely. He used whatever was available in a rural setting. Hammers, axes, meat cleavers, shovels. These weren't guns. This was blunt force trauma. It was loud, it was messy, and it speaks to a level of rage or compulsion that's just off the charts.
There's one detail about the weapons that's particularly disturbing. The sources mentioned he had a thing about his hammers.
Yes. He allegedly used a brand new hammer for each murder.
A new hammer every time. What does that even signify?
Psychologically, it's hard to say for sure. It could be ritualistic, a way of cleansing himself after each act, or maybe it was purely practical. A new weapon leaves no connection to the previous crime scene.
But it's so methodical. It's not the act of someone who's lost control. It's the act of someone who is in complete control.
It points to a very organized, very deliberate killer. And that organization extended to his victims. He was indiscriminate.
He killed everyone.
Everyone. Men, women, children, the elderly. If you were in the house, you died. And then there's the sexual violence component, which we can't ignore. He was convicted of 23 rapes.
And these happened before or after the murders?
Both, including, in some cases, post-mortem sexual assault. So this was a complete violation. It wasn't just about killing. It was about total desecration.
And for 4 years, he got away with it.
Yeah.
How did he move between these crime scenes across 4 provinces without anyone connecting the dots?
His mobility was his greatest weapon. He operated across Henan, Hebei, Anhui, and Shandong. These are huge provinces. And he didn't use cars. He didn't take buses or trains that would leave a paper trail.
He was on foot. Or on the bicycle.
Exactly. He was a ghost. He could commit a horrific massacre in one village and by sunrise be 50 miles away in a different province and nobody would ever know. The local police in one area had no idea the crime was connected to another one hundreds of miles away.
The jurisdictions weren't talking to each other.
Not effectively. The system was too fragmented. It worked entirely in his favor.
Can you give us a breakdown of where the crimes occurred?
Sure, the vast majority were in his home province, Henan. He confessed to 49 murders and 17 rapes there.
So he was most active on his home turf.
Yes, but he was deadly elsewhere too. 8 murders and 3 rapes in Hebei, 6 murders and 2 rapes in Anhui, and another 2 murders and 1 rape in Shandong. He had an incredible operational range.
And the police called him insidious. That speaks to his cunning, his criminal intelligence. We've talked about the new hammers, but he had other tricks, didn't he?
Yeah.
Specifically with his clothes and shoes.
This is what shows you how calculated he was. He always wore new clothes for his attacks. And most importantly, he wore shoes that were 2 sizes too big for him.
2 sizes too big. Why?
To leave false clues. In these rural areas, you're going to leave footprints in the mud or dirt. The police would find these large footprints and assume they were looking for a much bigger, taller man. He was actively manipulating the crime scene before he even committed the crime.
He's thinking like a detective, trying to stay one step ahead.
He absolutely is. And his cleanup was just as methodical. After each attack, he'd get rid of the weapon, maybe bury the hammer near a grave or something equally symbolic. Then he'd take off his bloody clothes and throw them in a river. By morning, he's gone, wearing clean clothes, oversized shoes, and there's virtually no forensic trail leading back to him.
To really bring home the horror of what he did, the sources give us a very detailed account of one specific attack. The murder of the Liu family.
Yes, this was December 6, 2002, in a village in Henan. Yang broke into the Liu family's home, and using an iron hammer, he killed 5 of them. Liu Anhui, his mother, his wife, and his young son and daughter.
The entire family.
The entire immediate family. Wiped out in a single night.
But there was a survivor.
There was one survivor. The 68-year-old grandfather, Liu Zongguin. And the only reason he survived was a heartbreaking twist of fate.
What was that?
The family had just built a new house right next to their old one. They were planning to move in just 3 days later. The grandfather decided to sleep in the new house that night just to try it out. If he'd waited, he would have been killed with the rest of them.
So he's the one who found them.
He was. The next morning, he walked into the old house, and the scene he described is just unimaginable. He said he found his granddaughter first. She had a hole in her head from the hammer.
My God.
And then he found his wife. She was still alive somehow. He said she was blinking, but she couldn't speak. She died 10 days later in the hospital. The others were already gone.
That's just, I have no words for that. And after this act of complete devastation, what did Yang do?
He just went through his routine, buried the hammer, threw his clothes in the river, and then, according to the reports, he walked for 2 hours to the nearest city and just blended back in.
The coldness of it is what's so hard to grasp. Which brings us to the biggest question of all. Why? Let's get into the motives. The sources present 2 very different theories.
They do. And this is really the core of the psychological mystery. The first one is the simple, official explanation. Revenge.
Revenge for what? What was the story that the media latched onto?
The story was that he'd been scorned. He had a girlfriend who broke up with him after she found out about his prison record, the theft and the attempted rape.
Okay.
And according to this narrative, that rejection just broke him. He felt betrayed by society and he snapped. He decided he was going to retaliate against society for this perceived injustice. It's a very neat, tidy explanation.
It's tidy, but does it really fit the facts? I mean, if you're getting revenge on society or on an ex-girlfriend, why are your victims poor rural families who have absolutely nothing to do with any of that?
That's the huge hole in the revenge theory. His victims were the most powerless people imaginable. They didn't represent society or the justice system in any way. Which leads us to the second, much more disturbing theory.
Which is what?
That there was no external motive. That it was pure psychological compulsion. It was about the act itself.
And we have his own words to back that up, don't we?
We do, and they are chilling. During his interrogation, he said, quote, "When I killed people, I had a strong desire to kill more. This inspired me to seek other victims.
So the killing fed the desire to kill. It was a self-perpetuating cycle.
Exactly. It was an addiction. And he made it very clear he had no moral connection to his victims at all. He said, I don't care whether they deserve to live or not. It is none of my concern.
He also said, society is not my concern.
Right. And police sources who interviewed him backed this up. They said he wasn't killing for money. The robberies were an afterthought. He was killing, in their words, to merely hurt society. The destruction itself was the reward.
There's that one quote that he apparently said to other inmates in the detention center.
Yes. When they asked him, why? Why did you kill so many people? His response was just flat. He said, killing people is very usual, nothing special.
Nothing special.
To him, it was as mundane as eating or sleeping.
So how do we square these two things? On the one hand, you have reports calling him mentally unbalanced, easily agitated. On the other hand, you have this incredibly methodical, cold, calculating killer who plans every detail down to the size of his shoes.
And that's the contradiction at the heart of Yang Xinhai. His actions over 4 years were the definition of organized and controlled. But his own statements reveal a mind that's completely detached from human reality.
So maybe the girlfriend's story wasn't the motive, but maybe it was the trigger.
That seems like the most plausible explanation. The desire, the script he was writing in his notebooks, that was already there. The rejection just gave him the final push, the excuse he needed to start turning his Plato Flats fantasies into reality.
He was a controlled psychopath who just needed a reason to let the mask drop.
I think that's a very good way to put it.
So after 4 years and 67 victims, this reign of terror finally comes to an end. But his capture, it wasn't the result of some brilliant detective work, was it?
Not at all. It was almost absurdly a complete accident. It happened on November 3rd, 2003, in a city called Kangzhou in Hebei province.
And how did they get him?
The police were doing a routine inspection, just a random check of entertainment venues, bars, places like that, and they spotted Yang. And they said he was just acting suspiciously.
Acting suspiciously. After everything he did, all the planning, he gets caught because he looked nervous during a routine shakedown. The irony is just incredible.
It is. It just shows you how deep under the radar he was flying. It took a random stroke of luck to finally catch him.
So once they had him in custody, how long did it take for them to realize who they were dealing with?
It happened very quickly. During questioning, they realized this guy was wanted for questioning in connection with murders in 4 different provinces. The final nail in the coffin was the DNA evidence. It linked him, conclusively, to crime scenes all over the country.
And what was his reaction when he was caught? Did he fight it, deny it?
No. He was apparently very calm. He confessed to everything, freely, without any pressure. He just laid it all out. 67 murders, 23 rapes. No remorse, no emotion, just that same flat, detached attitude.
Nothing special.
Exactly.
And the justice system, given the scale of his crimes, moved incredibly fast.
Breathtakingly fast. His trial was held on February 1st, 2004. It was held behind closed doors, officially to protect the privacy of the rape victims.
And how long did the trial last?
Less than 1 hour.
An hour.
Yeah.
To process 67 murders.
It was a formality. He'd confessed to everything. He was sentenced to death for homicide, rape, robbery, you name it. And he immediately waived his right to appeal. He wanted it to be over.
It was over very quickly.
Very. He was executed on February 14th, 2004, Valentine's Day.
Wow.
By a single gunshot to the head. From sentencing to execution, it was only 13 days. The state wanted to send a very clear message.
His legacy isn't just about the body count, though. It's about how this state and the media handled it.
Right. He was instantly nicknamed the Monster Killer, and the story was huge, obviously. But there was a strange official reaction. The state-controlled media initially put a blackout on the story.
A blackout? Why would they suppress the story of the capture of their worst-ever serial killer?
Because the story itself was an embarrassment. The fact that a man could kill 67 people over 4 years across 4 provinces using a bicycle, it made the security apparatus look weak. It presented China in a bad light at a time when the government's entire message was about stability and control.
So it was about managing their image.
It was entirely about managing their image, and what makes it so fascinating is what they were covering at the same time.
Right. The sources point this out, Gary Ridgway.
Exactly. The Green River Killer in the United States. Chinese state media was giving extensive, detailed coverage of Ridgway's capture and confession to 48 murders.
So let me get this straight. The public in China is getting a minute-by-minute account of an American serial killer, but the story of their own, more prolific serial killer is being actively suppressed.
That's the contradiction, and it shows you where the priorities were. It was more important to project an image of domestic tranquility than to be transparent about a profound crisis in public safety.
But the case did have a real-world impact, right? It forced changes in law enforcement.
It had to. His killing spree was a brutal wake-up call. It exposed the massive cracks in interprovincial police coordination. The police forces in Henan and Hebei and the other provinces were not sharing information effectively. They couldn't see the pattern.
So his case, in a way, forced them to modernize, to start talking to each other.
It was a catalyst for major reforms in criminal tracking and data sharing across the country. They realized that in a huge, rapidly changing society, a killer like Yang could exploit those institutional weaknesses with devastating results.
So to recap, we have a man born in poverty who scripts his murders in notebooks, kills 67 people with farm tools, evades capture for 4 years by wearing big shoes and riding a bicycle, and is finally caught by pure chance. It's an almost unbelievable story.
It really is a story of chilling efficiency and just, an incomprehensible volume of violence. And we're still left with that central question. Was it revenge for a broken heart, or was it just the thrill of killing? His own words suggest the latter, that it was all very usual, nothing special.
The fact that he operated for so long completely unseen really speaks to the unique vulnerabilities of a society in massive flux. Anonymity becomes the perfect camouflage.
And that remains the darkest legacy of Yang Xinhai, the monster killer. The chilling knowledge of how easily a methodical predator can operate when the world is changing too fast to notice.
So we'll leave you with a final thought to reflect on. Consider the implications of that media stratagem. The state decides to put a blackout on the story of Yang Xinhai's 67 murders, a domestic catastrophe, while at the same time it's broadcasting every detail about an American killer like Gary Ridgway. What does that choice, to mute your own crisis while amplifying a foreign one, tell you about a nation's priorities? About the tension between public safety and the need to project an image of absolute unshakable stability even when the ground is shifting beneath your feet.